She slept in the back corner of a public library, clutching a tattered copy of Little Women like it was her only friend. When Keanu Reeves found her, everything changed. What began as one quiet visit to a youth center became a national awakening and a reckoning no one saw coming. This is the story that lit the first fire. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The silence of the library wrapped around Keanu like a forgotten memory. He wasn't there for a book signing or a photo shoot. No press, no handlers. Just him, his jacket zipped halfway against the cold, and the hum of fluorescent lights buzzing softly overhead. It was the librarian who whispered the first words that shook him. "She's here again," the older woman said gently, nodding toward the back of the building. "Same spot, hasn't eaten since yesterday." Keanu turned, expecting maybe a teenager hunched over a laptop, skipping meals to study, but what he saw stopped him in his tracks. There, tucked behind the last row of shelves near the emergency exit, a girl, maybe 17, was curled up in a makeshift bed of old cushions. She clutched a worn paperback to her chest, her shoes neatly placed beside her like she still believed in order, even if life had none to give. Keanu didn't move right away. He watched as she stirred in her sleep, her brow furrowing, whispering something in a dream. There was a kind of quiet bravery in the way she held herself, even in sleep, like she was used to hiding pain behind discipline. "Her name's Mariah," the librarian murmured. "Aged out of the foster system 6 months ago. Came here looking for her caseworker, found out the center was closing down." Keanu's gaze stayed fixed on the girl. Something about her shook loose an old ache in him, something about the stillness, the aloneness. He approached slowly, making sure not to startle her. He crouched beside the cushion pile and gently tapped the corner of the book. Mariah blinked awake, confused. Then her eyes focused. She didn't scream. She didn't even gasp. Just stared at him, like she wasn't sure if he was real. "You're safe," he said softly. "I just wanted to see if you needed help." Mariah didn't speak. She nodded once, then quickly looked away. Keanu glanced down at the book. Little Women. Pages folded, spine worn to the threads. "You like Jo?" he asked. Another nod. "She's my favorite too," he smiled. "Fierce and gentle. That's rare." That was the first moment Mariah smiled back. Just a flicker. But it stayed with him. They sat across from each other at a corner table in a nearby diner. Mariah picked at the edges of her grilled cheese, like she didn't want to waste it too fast. Keanu didn't push her to talk. He just sat, sipping his coffee, letting the silence stretch into... Eventually, she spoke. They said I wasn't their problem anymore. Her voice was small, but steady. Keanu looked up. "Who said that?" She shrugged. "The last social worker. My birthday came. She dropped me at a shelter and said, 'Good luck out there,' like it was a joke." She paused, then added, "But the shelter was full. I slept on the steps." Keanu's fingers tightened around his cup. "How long have you been staying at the library?" Mariah glanced away. "Off and on. It's warm and quiet, and the security guard leaves me alone if I don't cause trouble." The words shouldn't have belonged to someone her age. There was a calmness in her voice, but it came from exhaustion, not peace. "Do you have anyone, family, friends?" he asked. She shook her head. "My mom OD'd when I was 9, never met my dad. I was in and out of homes. Some were okay, some weren't. But people don't want teenagers. We're complicated." He felt those words settled deep. She wasn't bitter, just matter of fact, like she had learned not to expect anyone to show up. "What about school?" "I finished online, got my GED. I wanted to be a teacher, actually. Thought I could help kids like me." She let out a breath. "But I guess that's dumb now." "It's not dumb," Keanu said. "Not even close." She looked up at him, unsure whether to believe it. "You still can be," he added. Mariah blinked. No one had said that to her before. No one had said, she still could do anything. He didn't promise her the world. He didn't tell her everything would be okay. But he paid for her meal, then slipped a folded piece of paper across the table. "What's this?" "My number and a name. Someone I trust who runs a small safe house for girls. Just in case you ever want help." Mariah hesitated. Then she tucked the note into her coat pocket, quietly. Keanu stood, slid a 20 under the plate, and looked at her one last time. "I meant what I said. You still can be." She didn't answer, but when he turned to leave, she whispered, almost too quietly to hear, "Thank you." He nodded without turning back. Outside, the sky was gray and heavy, but something had changed. A single voice had been heard, and that was how it would begin. Keanu didn't go to the awards event that night. He was supposed to be presenting a Lifetime Achievement honor, standing under warm lights, shaking hands with Hollywood's elite. Instead, he found himself back at the youth center near downtown, standing under flickering hallway bulbs and peeling posters. The center director, a woman named Darlene, recognized him immediately. "We don't usually get celebrities," she said, with a tired smile. Keanu smiled softly. "I'm not here as a celebrity." They walked through the building. The air smelled faintly of old lunches and cleaning spray. Walls were covered with crayon drawings and thank you notes from kids long gone. He asked about Mariah. Darlene nodded. "She came here a few times after she aged out, but the system doesn't give us much room. We do what we can, but..." She stopped in front of a room filled with cots and thin blankets. "We're shutting down in 3 weeks," she said. "Budget cuts. No replacement program, no transfer plan. The kids, they just scatter." Keanu looked around the room. It was warm, quiet, humble. Not a place of luxury, but of trying. Of holding things together with whatever thread remained. "They said she wasn't their problem anymore," Keanu murmured. Darlene nodded solemnly. "That's how it works. They age out, and then they disappear." There was no outrage in her voice, just sorrow, resignation, like someone who had screamed into the wind for too long and now only whispered. He didn't respond, just stood there, taking it in. Keanu walked to the bulletin board near the exit. It was covered in missing posters. Not from the police, but from the staff. Names, ages, scribbled notes of hope. "If you see Jamal, tell him we have his shoes. Alicia, your sketchbook is still here." He stared at them one by one, faces of children no one was looking for anymore. Then he turned and walked out into the night, his hands deep in his jacket pockets, his mind turning over something that felt heavier than anything he'd carried before. Because this wasn't just one girl in a library, this was a pattern. A silence so wide it swallowed lives whole. And he wasn't sure yet what he was going to do. But he knew he couldn't walk away. The next morning, Keanu returned to the youth center. He didn't bring cameras or security, just a bag of fresh bagels and 2 large thermoses of coffee. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, and the sky was streaked with pale gray light. The center was just opening its doors, and the air inside still held the chill of the night. Darlene greeted him with a quiet nod. She looked surprised to see him again, but didn't ask questions. She simply waved him in. He placed the breakfast in the break room and poured 2 cups. When she joined him, she sat down heavily, like she hadn't had a proper night's sleep in weeks. Keanu broke the silence. "I'd like to understand more about what's happening here, about what's not happening." Darlene rubbed her temples, then looked up at him. "You sure?" she asked. "Most people don't want to know. They want the charity gala version." "I'm not most people." She believed him. So she began. "The budget for youth transitional housing was slashed last year. We used to have 2 other facilities we could refer kids to once they turned 18. Both gone now. One turned into a city parking garage. The other's an Airbnb for event weekends." Keanu frowned. "What about state programs?" She laughed, but it held no humor. "They're stretched thin. There's a list. Kids wait months. Some never get a call back. And you know what happens when they wait too long? He shook his head. They disappear. That's the word we use. Disappear. He let the word hang. It wasn't metaphorical. It was literal. Darlene stood and walked over to a file cabinet. She pulled out a thick folder, frayed at the edges. Here. These are our aged-out cases from the last 18 months. 87 names. Some are doing okay, some we don't know. A few ended up incarcerated. One overdosed 2 weeks ago. Keanu flipped through the papers. Every few pages, he paused at a photo. A smile, a school report, a note that said, "No contact since discharge." He could feel the weight of it in his chest. "What about Mariah?" he asked quietly. Darlene hesitated. She was quiet. Didn't ask for much. Always reading, always polite. But we didn't have space for her. We referred her to a housing program. Waitlist was 6 months. She never came back. She sighed. "We do our best, but best isn't enough anymore." Keanu leaned back, the folder still open in his lap. "I found her asleep in a library." "I'm not surprised," Darlene said. "At least she's still nearby. Some just vanish." Another staff member, a younger man named Jordan, stepped in. He had heard the tail end of the conversation and looked hesitant, but something in Keanu's presence invited honesty. "You want stories?" Jordan asked. Keanu nodded. "I've got one. Kid named Elijah. 14 placements before he turned 17. Last home beat him so badly he ended up in the hospital. They called it an accident. Case closed. When he aged out, he had no ID. Couldn't get a job. Couldn't rent. He tried to enroll in a GED program, but couldn't prove who he was. Last I heard, he was couch surfing with someone he met at a bus stop." Keanu's jaw tightened. Darlene added, "We've had girls trafficked, boys pulled into gangs. These aren't just kids slipping through the cracks. The cracks are the system." Jordan sat down across from them. "I had one kid beg me not to age him out. He said, 'Just say I'm 17 for another year, please,' like I had that kind of power." Keanu looked down at the folder again. He flipped to another page. A girl named Tasha, smiling in a high school graduation cap. The note beside her picture read, "Left with trash bag of belongings. No contact since." He turned the page again. Another name. Another disappearance. "How often do you see this?" he asked. Darlie didn't flinch. "Every week." Jordan nodded. "Sometimes every day." Keanu folded the folder shut. He stared at the coffee cup in his hands, now cold. "Where's the money supposed to come from?" he asked finally. Darlene walked over to her desk and pulled out a printed email. She handed it to him. "This is from City Council. It explains why our funding was cut." He scanned it. It was a polished paragraph full of bureaucratic language. Reallocations, community beautification, fiscal responsibility. Not a single mention of kids. "They redirected the money to a public art initiative downtown," she said. "Sculptures and flower beds. Looks nice for the tourists." Jordan added, "They paved over one of our old drop-in centers. Called it Progress." Keanu read the final line of the letter again. "We appreciate your understanding and service to the community." It sounded like a slap. He folded the paper slowly. "What happens to the kids still here when you close?" "We've been told to refer them to other nonprofits, but those places are full too. We've had to start rationing blankets. You ever try to tell a 17-year-old he has to sleep in a stairwell because the city needed a new fountain?" Keanu didn't respond. Darlene crossed her arms. "You know what hurts the most? It's not that the system is broken. It's that no one seems to care it is. You're the first person in years to ask this many questions." He stood and walked to the window. Outside, the street was beginning to stir. A city waking up. People going about their lives, unaware that just one building away, children were being erased by red tape. Darlene joined him. "I've worked here for 23 years. I've buried 2 kids. Both aged out. Both ended up in alleys." She paused. "Sometimes I feel like I'm watching them drown and all I've got is a spoon to bail the water." Keanu turned to face her. Would you talk to others about this? Share what you just told me? Darlene nodded, but slowly. Not everyone wants the truth. And the people in charge, they're good at making sure it stays buried. I'm not one of those people. I can see that, she said. He looked back at the stack of files on her desk. Can I take these? She hesitated, then said, Copy them, leave the originals. But yes. As he gathered the folder, Jordan reached into his backpack and pulled out a small manila envelope. This isn't official, he said carefully. But some of us staff, we've been documenting things, places that lost funding, emails that don't add up. You didn't hear it from me. Keanu took the envelope and placed it inside his jacket. Then he turned back to Darlene. You've done more than anyone could ask. She smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. Just, promise me one thing. What's that? If you speak up, don't let them talk you down. Keanu nodded once. He left the center in silence, walking back into the daylight. The weight in his chest had shifted. Before, it had been the pain of one girl in a library. Now, it was the truth of hundreds more. Children erased by the very system meant to protect them. A crisis so deep, so widespread, that most people didn't want to look at it at all. But Keanu had looked, and now he couldn't unsee it. He got into his car and placed the folder on the passenger seat. Then he stared at the manila envelope Jordan had given him. No label, no fanfare. Just the start of something bigger. He didn't know where this path would take him, but he knew where it began. It began with the words he couldn't forget. They age out, then they disappear. Keanu didn't go home right away. After leaving the youth center, he made one call, then another. By nightfall, his core team was gathered around a long table in a quiet room above a bookstore he sometimes used for private meetings. No studio lights, no agents, just 5 people he trusted. A laptop sat open in front of him. On the screen was a scanned copy of the city council email Darlene had shown him. He had highlighted 2 lines. Funds redirected to downtown revitalization efforts. Increased public satisfaction with visual infrastructure. He looked up at the team. I want to know everything. Where the money was supposed to go, where it went instead, who signed off, who benefited. Sophia, his longtime researcher and former investigative journalist, nodded without hesitation. I'll trace the budget trail. Give me 72 hours. Keanu looked to Malik, a data analyst who'd worked with him on a previous humanitarian project. I need you to cross-section public city contracts. Look for overlaps between art installations and previous youth programs that were cut. On it, Malik said, already typing. Keanu leaned back in his chair. The folder from the youth center sat beside him, the envelope from Jordan unopened but heavy in his hand. This isn't about politics, he said. It's about a promise we broke, all of us. They worked through the night. No one complained. By morning, the first reports were coming in. Sophia printed a map of the city, marking every youth support facility that had shut down in the last 2 years. Red pins covered the southern districts like a rash. Next to them, she added green pins, locations of newly funded projects listed under the city's beautification initiative. Keanu stared at the pattern. Parks, fountains, sculptures, flower-lined intersections, all standing where shelters used to be. Malik dropped a spreadsheet in front of him. The numbers told a story just as clearly. 8 million redirected in 2 years, Malik said, mostly to the Department of Community Aesthetics, a new division created by council member Grace Whitfield. Keanu looked up. Dean chairs the Budget Oversight Committee, Sophia added. Also sits on the board of a nonprofit called Urban Elevation, which got multiple city contracts without competitive bidding. And who runs that nonprofit? Keanu asked. Her cousin, Malik replied. It wasn't illegal, but it smelled rotten. Later that day, Keanu slipped into a modest office building on the west side of town. No press, no publicists. Just him, dressed down, a baseball cap pulled low. He took the stairs instead of the elevator and knocked softly on the door at the end of the second-floor hallway. A woman opened it halfway, peeking out. You Keanu? She asked. He nodded, The woman stepped aside and let him in. Her name was Valerie. She was a caseworker who had spent 12 years in the foster system trenches. Darlene had mentioned her by name, someone who knew what went on behind closed doors, but had grown tired of screaming into the void. He poured him coffee in a chipped mug and sat across from him, arms folded. "I'm not here to get you in trouble," Keanu said. Valerie gave him a look that said she wasn't afraid of trouble, just used to being ignored. "I heard you've been in this work a long time," he added. She nodded once. "Too long." He waited. Sometimes silence was the only door people needed. Finally, she spoke. "They must tell us to close cases to meet quotas." Keanu's head lifted slightly. "Quotas?" "Yes. Every month we have to hit closure targets. Doesn't matter if the kid's stable. Doesn't matter if the housing is safe. They push us to close. Fewer open cases make the numbers look better. Make the department look efficient." She leaned in. "And if we push back, we get reassigned, labeled uncooperative." Keanu felt his chest tighten. "How long has this been going on?" Valerie looked at the ceiling like she was doing the math. "Since the last budget reform. 3, maybe 4 years. That's when everything shifted from care to metrics. Now it's about throughput, speed, optics." She reached into her file drawer and pulled out a thick folder. She slid it across the table. "I kept copies, notes. I blacked out names. But these are real. Some of these cases were closed before the kid even had a placement." Keanu opened the folder slowly. Inside were reports, emails, handwritten notes on case timelines. He read one: "No stable housing found. Placed in motel temporarily. File closed due to monthly quota." Another note: 17YO referred to job training program. No response. Marked independent. Case closed. His hands tightened as he turned the pages. Valerie kept going. "They call it streamlining, but what it really means is giving up. We're burying kids in paperwork and pretending we've done our jobs." She stood and walked to the window. "I used to love this job. Now I go home feeling like I've failed every day. You want to know what breaks a social worker? It's not the hours, not the pay. It's watching a kid beg for help and knowing there's no one left to listen." Keanu closed the folder and looked up at her. "Why are you showing me this?" She didn't hesitate. "Because I saw the clip of you with that girl, Mariah. I used to work her case. She was one of the good ones, smart, kind. She deserved better." Keanu's voice dropped. "She still does." Valerie nodded, eyes shining but defiant. "Then do something. Don't just talk. Don't make this another cause that gets a hashtag and then disappears." "I'm not here for headlines," he said. "Good, because this isn't a moment. It's a wound." Keanu stood and offered his hand. She took it, firm. "Do you want to stay anonymous?" he asked. Valerie thought about it. "No. If you go public with this, use my first name. I've got nothing left to lose." That night, back in the meeting room above the bookstore, Keanu laid the new folder down on the table beside the others. Sophia and Malik looked up, sensing the shift. "Sheen confirmed it," Keanu said. "They're closing cases to hit quotas. The kids are still in limbo, but the system says they're fine." Sophia rubbed her forehead. "This goes deeper than we thought." Keanu nodded. "This is not a broken pipe. This is a sinking ship." He stood, pacing the room slowly. "Beautification contracts, family nonprofits, performance-based case closures. It's all connected." "And what do you want to do with it?" Malik asked. Keanu looked out the window into the night, his reflection faint in the glass. "I want to show people what's happening. Not in numbers, not in reports, in names, faces, stories." He turned back to them. "I want them to feel what I felt reading those files." Sophia leaned forward. "Then we're going to need more than documents." "We'll get them," Keanu said. "There are more people like Valerie, more caseworkers, more kids. They just need to know someone is listening." He tapped the folder gently. "We start with this." A quiet beat passed between them. The weight of what they were carrying had grown, but so had their resolve. Keanu walked to the whiteboard and picked up a marker. At the top, he wrote in bold letters, "The Forgotten." Then, underneath, in smaller letters, "They told us to close the cases." Keanu waited at the cafe table with 2 cups of tea between him and the empty chair. Outside, the city moved as usual. Cars groaned at red lights, people hurried past on errands. But inside the quiet cafe, something more fragile was unfolding. The door jingled, and Mariah stepped in, hugging her arms close like the world outside had left a chill on her. She spotted him and walked over cautiously. He stood to greet her, offered a soft smile. No cameras, no pressure, just 2 people, and maybe, just maybe, a chance for something honest. Mariah sat and looked at the cup in front of her. She didn't touch it at first. "You don't have to say anything you're not ready to say," Keanu said. She nodded, then looked out the window. "I don't even know where to start." He waited. No rush, just presence. After a long pause, she whispered, "They put me in my first foster home when I was 11. My mom, she wasn't safe. Drugs, mostly, and guys who hit." Keanu listened, his eyes never leaving hers. "My first foster mom was nice. She had a little garden, taught me how to make pancakes. I thought maybe it wouldn't be so bad. But then she got sick, real sick, and the state moved me again." Mariah finally lifted the cup of tea. Her hands trembled slightly as she held it. "I bounced around, 12 homes in 6 years. Some people were okay, most just tolerated me. I learned not to ask for things, learned to keep my bag half-packed, just in case." Keanu leaned forward, elbows on the table, hands clasped loosely. "Home time," she continued. "I got placed with a couple who already had 3 foster kids. We weren't allowed to eat until they were done. They kept our clothes in trash bags lined up in the hallway. No dressers, no names on anything." She blinked slowly. "They called me number 4. Not Mariah, not even kid. Just a number." Keanu's jaw clenched subtly, but he said nothing. This wasn't about his anger. It was about her voice. Mariah looked up at him, expression unreadable. "When I turned 17, the last family I stayed with told the agency they didn't want teenagers anymore, said I was too much work. I wasn't even bad. I didn't party, I didn't scream, I just existed." She lowered her eyes. Apparently, that was already too much. Mariah took a breath, long and shaky, before continuing. "They gave me 20 minutes to pack, no warning, just said they'd found a temporary placement and I needed to be ready." She gave a half laugh, the kind that carried no joy. "I didn't have a suitcase, just a trash bag. That's what they handed me. I threw in my clothes, a toothbrush, and this old broken phone. No charger, no service. But it still had pictures from when I was 12. She pulled the phone out of her coat pocket and placed it on the table. The screen was spiderwebbed with cracks, and the back had peeled at the edges, like it had been dropped more times than anyone could count. "I kept it anyway," she said, "because it was mine, and because it proved I existed before all this." Keanu stared at the small device. It looked like nothing, but in her hands, it was everything. They dropped me at a temporary shelter, but it was full. The lady at the front desk looked at me like I was a mistake someone else had made. She told me to wait on the bench out front until someone figured out what to do. Maria looked away. "No one ever came," Keanu said quietly. "Is that when you ended up at the library?" She nodded. "It was warm. They didn't ask questions. I stayed quiet. I read. I just needed somewhere to exist without being in the way." A tear slipped down her cheek, and she wiped it quickly. Not from shame, but from the effort of holding it in for so long. "I finished my GED on a library computer," she said. "I used to sit there and look up lesson plans. I had this idea, crazy maybe, that I could be a teacher someday." Keanu's voice was soft but firm. "It's not crazy." She looked at him, eyebrows raised. "Come on. A homeless kid with no ID and a broken phone is going to be a teacher?" "You still can be," he said. Mariah looked away, blinking. You really believe that? I do, he said. Because I've seen what you've survived, and because the world needs teachers who understand what it means to be left behind and still choose to stay. She let those words settle in the space between them, not because she doubted him, but because it had been so long since anyone had believed she could be anything more than invisible. Mariah stared out the window for a long time. Cars passed, people walked, but her mind was somewhere else, somewhere buried under years of silence. When I was little, maybe 7 or 8, she said, my mom and I used to play this game. She'd ask me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I'd say something different every time. Astronaut, ballerina, scientist. She always smiled. She paused. That smile faded as the years went on. Keanu listened, unmoving. She used to write little notes and stick them in my lunchbox, just hearts or drawings. After she got addicted, the notes stopped. Then the lunches stopped too. Mariah looked back at him. But you know what's funny? I kept one of those notes. Found it in a book I carried around when I was first moved into care. I don't even know why I still have it. She reached into her bag and pulled out a tiny folded paper, soft with age. She opened it carefully. Inside was a child's crayon drawing, 2 stick figures holding hands under a crooked sun. One said, Mom, the other said, Me. Keanu looked at it for a long time, then back at her. She tried, he said quietly. Mariah nodded, yeah, until she couldn't anymore. They sat in the stillness that follows hard truths. Then she folded the paper and tucked it back into her bag. I've always wanted to matter to someone, she said. You do, Keanu answered. You always have. She didn't reply, but her shoulders relaxed. Just a little. He reached into his coat pocket and placed a small envelope on the table. This is for you. It's not charity, it's a step. She opened it slowly. Inside was a voucher for a month's stay at a transitional living facility, a prepaid card for groceries, and a list of community colleges with GED to teacher bridge programs. Mariah's hands trembled as she held the papers. Keanu said gently, You don't have to use any of it, but if you decide to try, you won't be alone. Tears welled in her eyes, but this time, she didn't wipe them away. She folded the papers carefully and placed them next to her broken phone. Then she looked at him and whispered, Thank you. The box arrived at night. There was no name on it, just a delivery slip taped to the top and a single line written in black ink. You need to see this. Keanu found it waiting on the back porch of the bookstore meeting space he had been using more frequently in recent weeks. He opened it slowly, expecting maybe more articles, budget documents, or statements from frustrated workers. But inside was something heavier. Folders, hundreds of them. He sat down on the floor, heart already pounding. His fingers moved through the first row, the second. They weren't just reports. They were case files, personal, incomplete, disordered, some with pictures, others with forms filled out halfway then crossed out, scribbled names, final notes that said nothing final. He pulled one from the top. Armando J., age 16, last known placement, transitional housing, status, discharged, reason, aged out, no further contact. Next file. Kayla N., 17, moved from group home after incident report. Case closed 3 weeks before scheduled graduation. Third file. Tremaine S., 15, allegations of abuse at placement. Report filed. No action documented. The breath left Keanu's chest. These weren't just misplaced records. These were abandoned lives. He reached deeper into the box and noticed a smaller envelope taped to the side. A note was inside, handwritten and unsigned. Davey closed our office last year. I couldn't take everything, but I took what I could. Someone has to care. Keanu read it twice, then picked up the next folder. It had a picture, black and white, probably from a printer, the kind used in government offices. A girl smiled back at him. Her hair was pulled into two tight braids. A wide-eyed hope sparkled in her expression. Melanie C., 14, removed from school records due to non-attendance. Caseworker note, considered runaway. Case closed 4 days later. There was no follow-up, no evidence anyone looked for her, no referral, just silence. He reached for another. This one didn't have a name on the cover, just a number. Inside was a form signed off by a supervisor with a rubber stamp. File resolved. Status, independent minor. There was no photograph, no history, just a scribbled note. Placed with known relative, no contact made, presumed stable. Keanu's jaw tightened. He flipped through the rest, faster now. Some files were barely held together. Some had coffee stains, faded ink. A few still had food smudges or scribbled math problems on the backs of sheets. Signs that these weren't just papers. These were children. As he laid them out on the table, a grim pattern began to take shape. Over 200 files, some closed too early, some with identical language. Independent, no response from placement, status unclear. There were at least a dozen marked with the same date, February 18, the year before. A single line in many of them read, "Case marked resolved by supervisor approval due to office closure." That was the same month one of the transitional housing units had shut down without warning. He paused at one file. The name on the front read, Danica J., age 16, high school junior, removed from care after multiple placements. Case closed after missed check-in. Her photograph showed a girl with bright eyes and a half smile. She wore a hoodie with the sleeves pulled over her hands. Keanu turned the page and read the closing line. No further resources available. But then something made him freeze. There was a note paper-clipped to the inside of the folder, handwritten, dated 3 months after the file had been closed. Danica J., found deceased in alleyway 3 blocks from shuttered youth shelter, no ID. Identification made through DNA weeks later, no press release. Keanu stared at the note for a long time. Then he laid the folder down on the table and placed both hands on it. His fingers shook. This was more than a crisis. This was a cover-up. He sat in that room for hours, going file by file. He highlighted names, wrote down patterns, traced the same 3 or 4 caseworker initials that kept appearing. Some names reappeared in more than one file, clearly moved from home to home, left to fend for themselves. Malik arrived around midnight. He saw the box and stopped in the doorway. "What is this?" Keanu didn't look up at first, just passed him a stack. Malik sat and started reading. His expression changed slowly, from curiosity to disbelief to horror. "These are closed files," he said. "They're not even in the state database anymore. Some of these names, I've never seen them in any of the reports." "They disappeared," Keanu said. "Officially." They worked in silence for a while. Then Keanu reached for the folder marked with Danica's name again. He circled her name in red marker. "This one," he said. "This one needs to be told." "She was found near the facility that shut down last year," Malik added. "I remember that closure. They said it was for fire code violations, but they never reopened it." Keanu nodded. "I want to know how many more of these end the same way." Malik swallowed hard. "I'll start cross-referencing names with public death records, criminal records, shelter intake logs. But it's going to take time." "We'll make time." They went back to the files. By morning, they had started color-coding categories. Trafficking risk, incarcerated, deceased, unknown. Some files had no updates for years. Others were stamped, unable to contact. Keanu paused at one folder that had a crayon drawing clipped inside. A house with a tree and a sun, just like the one Mariah had shown him the day before. He stared at it for a long time. How many kids drew these pictures thinking they'd find a home, he murmured. Malik didn't answer. At sunrise, Keanu stood and walked outside with one of the folders in his hand. He didn't say anything for a while, just looked out over the city as it stirred to life. unaware of the stories sealed in manila envelopes behind him. He turned back to the door and said quietly, "They don't get to be forgotten." Later that day, Keanu met with Sophia and presented the files. "We're going to digitize these," he said. "Every page, every name, we build a database. We tell their stories, one by one." Sophia's eyes widened as she flipped through the stack. "Where did these come from?" "A whistleblower," he said. "We don't know who, but they trusted us with the truth." She picked up Danica's file and read the note. "This is criminal. It's invisible," Keanu said. "That's what makes it dangerous." He turned to the whiteboard and added a new line under the heading he had written before. "The Forgotten." Subheading, "The files they hoped no one would find." They didn't speak for a moment. Then Sophia said, "Where do we start?" Keanu pointed to the red circle on Danica's folder. "We start with her." The request for a private meeting was polite, measured, and official. Keanu's team submitted it through all the proper channels, addressed it directly to Mayor Graham's office. Attached were summaries of the files they'd uncovered, anonymized to protect the children's identities. They also included Keanu's name, not as leverage, but as a promise. This wasn't about celebrity. It was about being heard. 2 days later, the response arrived. One paragraph, flat, formal. "Due to scheduling conflicts and ongoing commitments to public development initiatives, the mayor is unavailable for individual meetings at this time. No offer to reschedule. No acknowledgement of the subject matter. Just a clear signal, this conversation wasn't a priority." Keanu didn't respond with another letter. Instead, he checked the public schedule. The mayor was slated to speak at the grand opening of a new sculpture garden near downtown. The event was being promoted as a celebration of community art, revitalization, and progress. There would be press, donors, cameras, speeches. That was where he would go. When he arrived, the area was already filling with people. Lush greenery surrounded curved walkways, new concrete benches, and abstract statues arranged along the perimeter. One piece resembled a child reaching for the sky, made of polished steel, arms extended, head tilted upward. It was beautiful, but Keanu couldn't stop thinking about the number Sophia had found the night before. One sculpture, one plaza, one parking structure. Combined, the city had spent over $4,300,000, 0 cents. Money that had originally been allocated to transitional housing programs, job training, and mental health support for at-risk youth. He watched from a distance as the mayor, flanked by city council members, stepped up to the microphone. A polished man in a tailored suit, Graham beamed with pride. "This space," the mayor announced, "is a symbol of what we can accomplish when we invest in the future of our city. A place where beauty, imagination, and community come together." The audience applauded, cameras clicked, a drone hovered overhead. Keanu walked forward, past the crowd, past the velvet rope, and stopped a few feet from the podium. He didn't interrupt. He waited until the mayor concluded his statement and stepped back. Then, in the sudden lull between introductions and applause, Keanu spoke. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "How many foster kids had to sleep outside so we could fund this?" The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was devastating. All eyes turned toward him. Keanu stood calmly in front of the crowd, hands by his sides, gaze steady. He wasn't holding a microphone, but somehow everyone heard him. Reporters stopped writing, phones lowered. Even the mayor's polished smile faltered. No one expected a question like that. Not here, not at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Keanu took another step forward, voice unwavering. "I'm not here to disrupt your celebration. I'm here to remind you what this land used to be." He gestured gently toward the paved plaza beneath their feet. 10 years ago, there was a youth center right here. I know because I visited it. I met the director. I spoke with kids who aged out of the system and had nowhere else to go. A few people in the crowd exchanged glances. One reporter raised a camera again. "They tore that place down," Keanu said. "Called it outdated, unsafe, and they promised to replace it with something better, but instead they planted statues." His words weren't angry, they were mournful, honest. "I've read the files," he continued. "Over 200 foster cases marked closed, with no follow-up. Some of those kids ended up trafficked, some ended up in prison. Some, we'll never know." The mayor stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Mr. Reeves, if we could please..." Keanu raised a hand gently, respectfully, but firmly. "No offense, Mayor. I requested a private meeting. Your office declined. So I figured I'd bring the conversation to you." The audience murmured. A few clapped quietly. Others waited, unsure. Keanu turned toward them. "I'm not here to shame anyone. I'm here because I believe this city is capable of greatness, but we have to stop burying our children under red tape and fresh concrete." He pulled a small folder from his jacket and held it up. "This is one file," he said. "Her name was Danica, 16 years old, found dead last winter, 3 blocks from a shuttered foster shelter." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. "I'm not blaming a single person, but I am asking all of us, how did we let this happen?" The wind picked up slightly, rustling the trees planted around the sculptures. Keanu let the silence return. Let it speak. Then, softer, more personal, "These kids, they need a monument. They need a bed. They need someone to call when the world turns cold." He stepped back and didn't say another word. No one moved for a moment. Then, slowly, a woman in the back of the crowd lowered her sunglasses and stepped forward. She looked like someone who had seen too much and said too little for too long. "My nephew aged out at 17, she said aloud. "No job, no ID. He lived in his car until it got towed. Now he's just gone. No one can find him." Keanu didn't respond, but his eyes met hers with quiet understanding. Another voice rose. "I work at a shelter," a man said. "We turn away kids every week because we don't have beds. We called the city last month. No answer." The press began to stir again, scribbling down quotes, lifting cameras. One microphone turned toward Keanu, but he stepped aside, giving space to the people who had been voiceless for far too long. The mayor adjusted his collar and tried to speak, but every word sounded practiced now. He thanked Keanu for raising awareness and praised the city's commitment to moving forward. But the tone had shifted. His words landed hollow in a crowd that had just been given truth. Keanu didn't wait for applause. He walked back through the crowd the same way he came in. No one stopped him. Some clapped, others simply nodded. A few called out "thank you," and he nodded back without speaking. Behind him, the press event tried to continue, but the energy had drained from it. No one cared about the ribbon anymore. Later that evening, the footage hit social media. Within an hour, the clip of Keanu asking his question, "How many foster kids had to sleep outside so we could fund this?" began trending. By midnight, it had 2 million views. The next morning, news outlets began requesting interviews. Talk shows called, advocacy groups reached out. Former foster youth started sharing their own stories under the hashtag that began circulating with the video, "Not Forgotten." Keanu didn't respond to the attention. He didn't go live. He didn't issue a statement. Instead, he sat with his team in their small office, the box of files still open in front of them. They didn't celebrate. They got back to work. Because one question had finally been asked. And now, the silence had a crack in it. The invitation came 3 days after the Sculpture Garden confrontation. It was from a local network known for community-focused programming. They were hosting a live town hall event, originally meant to spotlight new investments in the city's art and culture sector. Keanu had been invited as a surprise guest, mostly for star power. A few pre-approved questions about public partnerships, maybe a comment about creativity and healing. But Keanu had other plans. He arrived early, dressed simply in black jeans and a dark blazer. No entourage, just him, a notebook, and a single folder tucked beneath his arm. The producer met him backstage, walking him through the show format and reminding him that the discussion would center on mural funding and revitalization efforts. Keanu nodded politely. He wasn't here to argue about art. He believed in it. He always had. But not at the cost of people, not anymore. The set was designed like a community auditorium. Brick walls, overhead lights, folding chairs arranged for the studio audience. Local artists, teachers, donors, and council members sat in a semicircle. The hosts introduced the evening with practiced warmth, highlighting the city's creative resurgence, the new murals planned for underpasses, and sculptures installed near schools. Then they welcomed Keanu Reeves to the stage. He stepped up to the microphone with quiet confidence. A few audience members clapped. Others looked curious. The host smiled, ready to move into the scripted segment. But Keanu didn't wait for the prompt. He opened his folder and pulled out a photograph. "This," he said, holding it up, "is Danica." The room fell still. She was 16 when her case file was marked closed. She didn't run away. She didn't graduate early. She didn't find a job. She died, alone, in an alley, 3 blocks from a shelter that was shut down to fund a sculpture park. The host cleared his throat, caught off guard. Keanu continued, steady and unwavering. "I'm not here to talk about murals. I'm here to talk about memory. We are painting over trauma with pastel colors and calling it progress. But the truth is, we're failing children, right now, in real time." He paused, then delivered the sentence that would soon ripple across the country. "We're painting murals while kids starve 3 streets away." The air in the room shifted. Some of the audience members sat up straighter. Others looked down at their laps, unsure of how to respond. The host tried to pivot back to the intended discussion, asking Keanu if he believed art and infrastructure improvements could coexist with social care initiatives. Keanu didn't take the bait. "I'm not against art," he said calmly. "I believe in its power to heal. But healing starts with dignity. And there's no dignity in sleeping on concrete or aging out of foster care, with nothing but a garbage bag and a broken phone." He pulled out a second photo, this one of Mariah's, sitting on the steps of a public library, her arms wrapped around a paperback. "This is Mariah. She aged out at 17, spent weeks in that library trying to disappear quietly, not because she didn't care about life, but because she didn't believe anyone cared about her." A woman in the 3rd row gasped softly. Another wiped her eyes. Keanu continued, "I've met with youth center directors, caseworkers, survivors of the system. I've read hundreds of files. Some of them end in prison, some in the streets, and some don't end anywhere. They just vanish." The host tried again. "Mr. Reeves, many would say that systemic reform isn't something you can address in a town hall format." Keanu nodded. "I agree. We can't fix a broken system in 90 minutes, but we can stop pretending it isn't broken. We can start by seeing the invisible." He leaned in slightly, his voice more intimate now. "I don't have all the answers, but I've seen enough to know this. These kids aren't statistics. They're stories no one took the time to read." He looked directly at the camera. "But if you're watching this at home and you've ever felt invisible in a system that was supposed to protect you, I want you to know something." A pause. "It wasn't your fault. You deserved more, and your story matters." The room was silent. No one moved. Then, slowly, applause began to build, not the kind that comes from obligation, but from recognition, from resonance. One man stood, then another. A few people clapped through tears. And across the country, thousands watched as something real broke through the noise. After the broadcast ended, the station's switchboard lit up. Messages poured in, some from former foster youth, others from caseworkers, teachers, and everyday citizens who had seen too much or had lived through too much to stay quiet. Within hours, clips of Keanu's words flooded social media, not just the moment he held up Danica's photo, but the part that pierced something deeper. "We're painting murals while kids starve 3 streets away." That single line hit like a lightning bolt. Hashtags spread, not forgotten, foster truth, and most notably, the one the studio itself had added beneath the replay upload on their platform. Have you ever felt invisible in a system that was supposed to protect you? Share below. And people did. The comments section filled with stories, raw, heartbreaking, unfiltered. I was 15 when they closed my case. I didn't have a place to go, slept behind a laundromat for 3 weeks before someone even noticed I was missing. My brother aged out last year. We haven't heard from him since. I worked intake for 5 years. I was told to stop asking questions. I still think about the kids I couldn't help. Keanu didn't reply to the comments. He didn't retweet or make a follow-up post. But he read them all. That night, back at the small office above the bookstore, he sat with Sophia and Malik as the comment threads continued to grow by the thousands. Sophia looked over at him. "You cracked something open." Keanu shook his head gently. "They did. I just asked a question." Malik scrolled through the latest stories, his eyes heavy. "It's not just our city. This is happening everywhere." Keanu leaned back, his voice steady. "Then we don't stop here." He walked to the whiteboard where "The Forgotten" was written in bold letters. Beneath it, he added a new line. "The ones who spoke up." Because now, for the first time, they weren't alone. The silence had shattered, and the country had started to listen. The headlines started appearing the next morning. They came fast, from national outlets and local bloggers alike, many carrying the same tone, measured doubt disguised as critique. Some questioned his motives, others questioned his qualifications, but most carried a single thread. He's not a politician. A well-known pundit on a major cable network raised an eyebrow and said to the camera, "I love Keanu Reeves as an actor, but public policy is a serious business. Celebrity rants don't solve systemic problems." Another op-ed from a city publication was more direct. "Keanu Reeves is grandstanding. Passion is not policy. Emotion is not infrastructure." On a national talk radio program, a host scoffed, "Is this what we've come to? Movie stars showing up at city events, hijacking them with sob stories and no real solutions?" Keanu saw the comments. Sophia emailed him daily media summaries just in case, but he asked her not to read them aloud. He didn't need to know what they were saying about him. He wasn't doing this for them. The day after the town hall, the clip reached over 10 million views. More than the soundbite itself, it was the silence that followed his question that stuck with people. It had become a mirror, held up to a country unsure of how to look itself in the face. While the media debated him, something else happened. The comment sections beneath the clip on YouTube, on news sites, on Facebook exploded with voices, not critics, survivors. One read, "I was in the system from 5 to 18, never adopted. I still have nightmares, and no one ever asked how I was doing. Until now." Another, "My brother aged out 2 years ago. He didn't make it. I thought no one remembered. Keanu, thank you." A woman wrote, "I've waited my whole life for someone to care like this." Some just posted the year they aged out. Others shared nothing but the name of the last home they were placed in, as if saying it out loud made their experience real again. Keanu didn't reply to the articles, didn't tweet back, didn't go on air to defend himself. But he responded to nearly every one of the survivor comments. Not as a celebrity, as a human being who was listening. Keanu spent the next 2 evenings reading comments aloud to his team, not for praise, not for validation, but to make sure the names were heard, the memories honored. Some of the stories were just a sentence or two. "I was in 21 placements by the time I turned 16. My caseworker disappeared. I never knew why. I just stopped getting visits. I lost my little brother in the system. He's out there somewhere. I think." Others came in paragraphs, typed from old phones, cracked keyboards, public library computers. Long, heartbreaking testaments of kids who had tried to hang on, who had tried to believe in promises made by adults with good intentions but empty hands. One message in particular stayed with Keanu for days. It read, "I never thought I mattered. I didn't even know how to ask for help. But then I watched you speak, and for the first time, I felt like someone was speaking to me. You don't know me, but I want you to know. I didn't give up today because of what you said." That one he printed and taped to the wall near his desk. Sophia scrolled through the growing comment threads and turned to him. "You're shifting something," she said. "People aren't just reacting, they're remembering." Keanu nodded. "They've always remembered. They were just waiting to be seen." Meanwhile, the criticism continued. A well-known columnist accused him of weaponizing sentimentality. A city spokesperson released a statement saying, "We respect Mr. Reeves's passion, but we encourage constructive participation through official channels." Keanu didn't flinch. He wasn't looking for permission. One night, during a quiet moment in the office, Malik looked up from his laptop. "You know they're going to try to make this political, right? Use it to divide people. Left, right, budget fights, blame games." Keanu closed a folder and looked at him. "This isn't political, it's personal." And that was how he kept approaching it. Not as a campaign, not as a cause, but as a conversation long overdue. He started making voice notes to send back to people who messaged him directly. Simple recordings. Just his voice saying, "I hear you," or "You didn't deserve what happened," or "You're not alone." They weren't long, they weren't polished, but they were real. And for the people who received them, it meant the world. The noise from critics never fully stopped, but something had changed. For every op-ed questioning Keanu's intentions, there were hundreds of voices rising from the shadows. Former foster youth, social workers, volunteers, parents who had lost children to the system. Every time one story was shared, another followed. At one point, an early morning news anchor asked on live television, "Should Keanu Reeves stick to acting?" The next day, someone wrote under the original town hall video, "He's done more in 3 weeks than most lawmakers have done in 3 decades." That comment alone was liked over 100,000 times. Meanwhile, Keanu continued his quiet work. He never lashed out at reporters, never clapped back at talking heads. He stayed focused on the files, the survivors, and the growing web of stories they were helping organize. The Foster Files Project, originally a private database for whistleblower cases, had grown into something much larger. A public digital archive was now in development, where those who had aged out of the system could submit their names, timelines, memories, and missing pieces of their lives. He read every one submitted. Sometimes in the early hours of the morning, alone in the quiet office, Keanu would read names out loud, not for drama, not for camera, just so that someone said them again, just so they were remembered. On a Thursday evening, Mariah sent him a message. It was just one line. "You kept your promise." He replied instantly, "So did you." She was now living in transitional housing, enrolled in a community college program for education majors. Her broken phone had been replaced, but she still carried it in her backpack. She said it reminded her not of being forgotten, but of surviving. That weekend, Keanu posted one simple message to his personal page, his first direct words in weeks. "I'm not here to fight the critics. I'm here to answer the ones who've been crying out and hearing nothing. If you're one of them, I hear you, and I'm not going anywhere." He didn't tag anyone, didn't hashtag it, just posted it and logged off. But by midnight, it had gone viral again. Because in a world full of noise, sometimes the quietest voice is the one that changes everything. The sky was gray the morning the youth center shut its doors. There were no ribbon cuttings, no farewell speeches, no reporters waiting outside. Just a laminated sign taped to the glass, the kind used for holidays or snow closures, except this one didn't have a return date. It read, "This facility is permanently closed. For emergency assistance, contact the city hotline." The hotline had been disconnected 3 weeks ago. When Keanu arrived, the parking lot was half empty. Darlene stood outside, holding a clipboard and a paper coffee cup gone cold. Her shoulders were squared, but her eyes looked heavier than usual. He approached quietly, carrying 2 oversized duffel bags over his shoulders. Behind him, a small van pulled in, its back full of boxes and folded blankets. Sophia was behind the wheel, and Malik helped unload the supplies. "You didn't have to come," Darlene said quietly. "I did," Keanu replied. "And I'm not here to say goodbye." She nodded, then stepped aside so he could see through the glass. Inside, a few kids sat scattered on the floor, silent, tired, unsure where to go. A boy leaned against the wall with his head in his hands. Two girls shared a pack of crackers, huddled together on the couch. Mariah stood by the window, her arms crossed tight, her backpack slung over one shoulder. Keanu walked in without a word. He placed the duffel bags down and opened one. Inside were rolled sleeping bags, gloves, hats, socks, and packaged food. He turned to the group. "I know this isn't what you deserve," he said gently. "And I know this building closing feels like another door slamming shut." He glanced at Mariah, then back to the others. "But I want you to hear something clearly. You are not being forgotten." No one spoke, but a few heads lifted. One of the younger teens, maybe 15, looked at the socks like they were gold. Keanu reached into his jacket and handed Darlene an envelope. She opened it slowly, eyes widening at the check inside. "That's to cover staff salaries for the next 30 days, he said. "At least the basics. You keep the doors open any way you can, even if it's just warmth, food, and someone answering the door." Darlene blinked fast, fighting the lump in her throat. "You don't know what this means." "I think I do," he said quietly. Mariah approached slowly, still cautious even after everything. She looked down at the floor, then at the sleeping bags, then finally up at Keanu. "I didn't think you'd come back," she said. "I said I would," Keanu replied. She gave a small nod, then turned her eyes to the others. "Some of them haven't eaten since yesterday." Keanu walked back to the van and returned with a hot box of pre-packed meals. Sophia followed with a tray of warm drinks. Malik passed out hand warmers and thin winter coats they had bought from a supplier in bulk. The kids gathered without hesitation. Quiet at first, but as the warmth filled their hands and the food filled their stomachs, something in the room shifted. The silence began to lift, even if just a little. Darlene moved among them, checking in, offering hugs, giving out the last bits of encouragement she could muster, but the fear in her eyes remained. She pulled Keanu aside near the empty front desk. "We've got 4 teens with nowhere to go by tomorrow," she whispered. "They don't meet the requirements for the city-run shelter. Too old for group homes. Too young for adult centers. It's the gap no one talks about." Keanu nodded. "We'll figure it out." "I've heard that before," she said, "but never from someone who actually meant it." He stepped outside and made a call, then another. He had already started compiling a list. Places willing to take emergency referrals, small nonprofits, churches with rooms above community halls, even people he knew personally who had offered a spare couch or a basement just to get kids through a cold night. By late afternoon, they had secured transitional housing placements for 3 of the 4, not permanent, but safe. Real beds, doors that locked, adults who cared. When he told the teens, 2 of them looked stunned. One cried. The third simply whispered, "Really?" As if disbelief had become a way of life. For the 4th teen, a boy named Zeke who had run away from an abusive home at 15, Keanu made a personal call to a former teacher he'd met during a school visit years ago. She now ran a private recovery home with her husband for kids who had slipped through the cracks. They said yes without hesitation. When Keanu told Zeke, the boy didn't say anything at first. He just stared at the floor, holding his coat tightly. Then he looked up. "Why are you doing this?" Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder. "Because someone should have." As the sun began to set, a soft orange glow filtered through the dusty windows of the youth center. The kids were quieter now, but the tension had eased. Some sat in small groups, talking for the first time in days. Others were curled up in the sleeping bags Keanu had brought, resting. Finally warm and full. Darlene stood by the door, arms crossed, watching the scene with quiet disbelief. "I've been in this job for over 20 years, she said, "and this is the first time someone walked in and actually did what they said they'd do." Keanu didn't answer right away. He just looked at the room with the same reverence he once reserved for sound stages and set lights. There was something sacred in the way these young people held on, despite everything, despite everyone. He turned to Mariah, who stood by the window once again, this time not alone. Zeke was beside her, quietly sipping cocoa. The fear in his eyes had softened. It wasn't gone, but it was no longer the only thing in his expression. Mariah walked over, holding her backpack. "Where will you go next?" she asked. Keanu shrugged slightly. "Wherever the next kid is slipping through the cracks." She smiled. "You make it sound simple." "It's not. But that doesn't mean we stop trying." She nodded, then reached into her backpack and pulled out something folded. It was a page torn from a notebook. On it was a rough sketch of a classroom. Kids sitting in chairs, a teacher at the front with her name written above the chalkboard in big block letters, Miss Mariah. "I've had this for a long time," she said, "but today's the first day I actually believe it could happen." He took the drawing carefully and folded it, placing it in his coat pocket. "It will," he said. "I believe in you." Then he turned to the room once more. Some eyes were on him, others weren't. It didn't matter. He raised his voice gently. "You are not forgotten." And for the first time in a long while, every head turned. Every voice fell still. Because in that moment, it didn't sound like a promise. It sounded like a fact. The idea came quietly, late one night. Keanu was sitting alone at the office with Danica's folder open in front of him. Her picture stared up from the page, frozen in time, smiling faintly through a copy machine's grainy ink. He kept thinking about how many others were out there. Kids who had disappeared into silence, closed files, missing records. He realized something. There needed to be a place where they could be found again. Not by reporters or government auditors, but by each other. By those who lived it. By those who never forgot. The next morning, he called Sophia and Malik into the office early. He shared his idea, raw and unpolished. "I want to create a platform," he said, "a digital archive, but more than that, a place where survivors can tell their stories, where caseworkers can speak freely, where whistleblowers can come forward without fear." Sophia leaned in. "You're talking about something bigger than a website." "I'm talking about a memory bank," Keanu said, "a map of everything that got erased." They named it the Foster Files. Within a week, the team partnered with 2 ethical developers, a trauma-informed advocacy group, and a nonprofit that had already been collecting anonymous testimonials from social workers for years. They built out a secure platform where users could create entries with or without identifying details. They could submit timelines, memories, documents, even photos. They could tag names, cities, dates, whatever they remembered. No login required. No profile needed. Just a place to speak. When the platform launched, Keanu didn't do a press conference. He didn't post a video. He just published one written message. "If you've been lost in the system, this space is yours." In the first 24 hours, 200 stories were submitted. By the end of the first week, there were over 5,000. They came from every state. I was in 17 homes. No one asked me what I wanted. Damien told me I was being adopted. It was just another placement. I begged my caseworker not to send me back. She did. I still have the scars. One entry simply read, "I was 12 when they lost me. I'm 30 now. Thank you for finding me again." Keanu read that one out loud. Then he read it again. Because some things need to be said more than once. With every submission, the Foster Files grew, not just in numbers, but in depth. Each story formed a thread. Over time, the threads wove themselves into a national tapestry of truth. The stories varied. Some were a few lines, others went on for pages, but each one added a new piece to a puzzle that had long been ignored. Sophia and Malik worked around the clock to sort and categorize the entries. They developed a tagging system to highlight regions, age groups, outcomes. Malik began to notice patterns. Entire clusters of youth who disappeared around the same facility closures. Cities where dozens of case files went dark the same year funding was redirected. "This isn't just powerful," Malik said one night, eyes red from screen glare. "It's evidence." Sophia nodded. "It's a living record." One woman submitted a timeline of her placements, along with photocopied letters she'd written as a child, pleading to be reunited with her siblings. "I don't know where they are now," she wrote. "Maybe someone here will." Within 2 days, a user replied, "Your brother wrote in yesterday. He's been looking for you too." The comment was marked with a green heart. Connection made. That's when Keanu understood something deeper than policy or paperwork. People didn't just want to be heard. They wanted to be found. And sometimes they were. He brought in 2 therapists to consult on content moderation. Some of the stories were heavy, too heavy for a public forum without care. The team created a support response system that offered resources after each submission: crisis lines, shelter directories, free legal aid services. They made space for joy too. One thread invited users to post the first time they felt safe. Someone wrote, "The day I was finally allowed to lock my bedroom door." Another, "When the librarian let me keep a book." And one, "My foster sister made me pancakes on my birthday. No one had ever done that before." The comment section below that was filled with dozens of pancake emojis, a quiet celebration born from something simple. Keanu never made himself the center of the project. He didn't plaster his name on the homepage. His voice showed up only in the form of quiet replies. "Thank you for your strength. You're not forgotten. You matter more than they ever told you." Sometimes, that was all it took. The Foster Files began to gain national attention, not through flashy headlines or viral outrage, but through quiet, relentless testimony. News outlets started referencing it in reports. Law professors cited it in lectures. Advocacy groups used it to pressure state legislators. The stories could no longer be ignored. Keanu refused every interview request. Instead, he kept showing up at the office, sorting through submissions, replying when he could, reading into the early hours of the morning. Sometimes with a cup of coffee, sometimes with nothing but silence and a pen in hand. On the 3rd week, a former caseworker submitted her story. She had worked in 3 counties across 2 states. Her entry began with, "I did my best. I swear I did." She detailed impossible caseloads, staff turnover, the pressure to close cases quickly. She wrote about the guilt she carried, names she still remembered, kids she couldn't save. At the end, she wrote, "I didn't think anyone would believe me. But then, I watched the town hall clip. I cried the whole night. Thank you for making space for people like me." Keanu replied to her personally, "You carried more than you should have. I believe you. And I'm glad you're still here." That night, he pinned her story to the top of the site's homepage. It wasn't just about youth anymore. It was about the people inside the system who had tried, the ones who burned out, the ones who still carried the weight. Mariah volunteered to help with submissions. She read stories out loud at gatherings. In one of the first public events they hosted, she stood in front of a room filled with former foster youth and whispered, "You don't need to be famous to make change. You just need to remember." Keanu stood in the back, watching. He didn't need the spotlight. He had already seen what it did. Now he was building something that would last longer than applause. Before he left that night, he updated the banner on the Foster Files homepage. It no longer read just, "Submit your story." Now it said, "This is where the silence ends." And beneath that, in smaller font, a single line that hundreds had already repeated. "I was 12 when they lost me. I'm 30 now. Thank you for finding me again." The shelter was quiet when Keanu arrived. It was a converted church basement. Low ceilings, cinder block walls, and the faint smell of bleach and overcooked pasta lingering in the air. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly, casting a cold glow over rows of folding cots lined with thin army green blankets. No one made a big deal when he walked in. That's how he wanted it. He nodded to the director, a tired but kind man named Oscar, who greeted him with a handshake and a whispered, "Glad you came." Keanu had told no one outside his team where he was going that night. He didn't want press, he didn't want donors. He just wanted to see it, feel it, be present, in the place where statistics became faces. Oscar handed him a pair of gloves and directed him to the kitchen, where he joined two volunteers ladling spaghetti into paper bowls. He served dinner for nearly an hour. Teenagers shuffled through the line with sunken eyes and oversized coats. Some offered shy smiles, others didn't look up at all. Keanu made no effort to introduce himself. He just asked, "Garlic bread?" or "Do you want more sauce?" and offered warm food with gentle eyes. After dinner, he helped wipe tables, mop the floor, and haul two leaking trash bags out to the alley. No cameras, no headlines, just work. He noticed a boy, maybe 12, sitting alone near the end of the room, playing with the corner of a torn blanket. Keanu grabbed 2 bottles of water and walked over. He sat beside him, offering one without a word. The boy glanced at it, took it, then stared straight ahead. After a while, he spoke. "You're that actor." Keanu smiled slightly. "Sometimes." The boy looked at him. "You cleaning floors now?" "Tonight, yeah." The boy squinted at him. "Why?" Keanu paused. "Because I needed to remember what it feels like to be close to the problem." The boy didn't say anything else for a long time. Then, softly, he asked, "Are you staying?" Keanu looked at him, steady. "I'll be back." And he meant it. After dinner, the shelter settled into its nighttime rhythm. The floor was mopped, chairs stacked, and the lights dimmed to a soft yellow glow. Cots were pulled out from storage and arranged in rows. Each one had a pillow, a worn blanket, and a number taped to the foot for tracking. Keanu helped unfold them, quietly, one by one. Oscar walked past him and handed him a folded cot sheet. "You can grab a corner in the back," he said. "Most volunteers head home after shift." Keanu looked up. "Not tonight." He laid out the sheet on a cot near the back wall, next to a heating vent that buzzed faintly. It wasn't comfortable, but that wasn't the point. He didn't come for comfort. By 9 o'clock, the room was full of quiet motion. Kids slipping under blankets, some whispering, some staring at the ceiling. A girl paced slowly near the bathrooms, arms crossed, earbuds in. A teenage boy curled up with his backpack clutched to his chest. Keanu sat against the wall, watching, listening. He didn't try to talk. He just remained present. Eventually, one of the younger boys walked up to him. His name tag said Miles, handwritten in green ink. "You really staying here?" Miles asked. Keanu nodded. The boy squinted at him. "Why?" Keanu offered a small smile. "Because sometimes the best thing you can do is show up." Miles sat down next to him on the floor, hugging his knees. "You don't talk like the other adults." "What do they talk like?" "Like I'm a problem they don't have time to fix?" Keanu's chest tightened. "You're not a problem," he said. "You're a person." Miles leaned his head on his arm. "Sometimes I feel like I disappeared and no one noticed." Keanu looked at him gently. "I see you." The boy didn't respond, but he stayed there. That said more than words ever could. Later that night, Keanu lay down on the cot with his coat as a pillow and the hum of the vent in his ear. Sleep came slowly. Around him, there were small coughs, shuffles of feet, the occasional whisper. It was nothing like his home, but it was everything that mattered right now. This was the front line, and he wanted to be exactly where he was. Morning came early. The shelter lights clicked on just after 6. Kids groaned, stretched, pulled blankets over their heads. A few had slept deeply, others barely at all. Still, the scent of toast and instant oatmeal wafted from the kitchen, and for a moment, the air felt like any ordinary morning. Keanu was already up. He'd been awake for a while, helping fold linens and sanitize the cots before they were stacked away. He moved without needing to be asked, refilling water pitchers, wiping down doorknobs, carrying trash to the alley. Oscar gave him a nod of quiet appreciation. No big speech, no fuss. Just mutual understanding between men who had seen too much and knew what it meant to keep showing up. Miles spotted Keanu near the sink and walked over, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "You really stayed the whole night?" he said. "Told you I would," Keanu replied. The boy hesitated, then handed him something. A folded piece of paper. On it was a drawing. 2 stick figures, side by side, beneath a star. One had messy hair, the other wore a long coat. Keanu unfolded it slowly. "That's you," Miles said, pointing. "And that's me." Keanu smiled. "I'm honored. Will you come back?" He crouched down to eye level. "Every week." Miles didn't answer, but he nodded. That was enough. Later that day, back at his office, Keanu placed the drawing in a frame on the windowsill, right beside Danica's file and Mariah's classroom sketch. A quiet gallery of reminders, a collection of truths. The shelter had become part of his rhythm. Once a week, without fail, he returned, not for photo ops, not for thanks, but because it mattered. He served meals, wiped tables, played cards, helped with homework. Sometimes he just sat on the floor beside a kid who needed to say nothing at all. Each visit was another thread in a net he was trying to build, one strong enough to catch those still falling. And every time someone asked, "Are you staying?" he'd say the same thing: "I'll be back." The backlash finally found its way to Washington. In a televised interview, Senator Raymond Clark, a ranking member of the Senate Committee on Social Services, spoke plainly. "I respect Mr. Reeves' passion," he said, adjusting his tie, "but the foster system is not broken. It's strained, yes, but fundamentally it works. We don't need theatrics, we need patience and process." The anchor nodded along. The tone was polite, dismissive, strategic. That same clip aired on 3 networks and circled social media with speed. It was the first major political response to Keanu's growing influence, and it wasn't subtle. Keanu watched it late that night with his team. Malik was the first to speak. "They're trying to turn this into damage control," Sophia said. "He's daring you to go away." Keanu stood quietly, then replayed the clip again. He didn't respond with a statement. Instead, he made a phone call to a small nonprofit that worked with aged-out youth across the senator's district. Then another to a volunteer coordinator who once ran transitional housing in Clark's home state. By the end of the next day, Keanu had assembled a group, 10 young adults, ages 18 to 25. Every one of them had aged out of the system. Every one had lived the truth the senator denied. Some had been homeless, others trafficked. A few had records, not because they were violent, but because they had been criminalized for being poor, unstable, and unprotected. They didn't ask to go. He didn't pressure them, but when he explained what Senator Clark had said, most responded the same way. "Says it's not broken? He should hear from the people it broke." So they traveled together. No podiums, no banners, just a van, a small caravan of cars and hearts, carrying more than most could imagine. They arrived at the senator's district office on a quiet weekday morning. Keanu had called ahead. No request for a meeting, just a courtesy. He told the receptionist, "We'll be outside at noon. That's all." He brought no prepared remarks, no media team. But the media showed up anyway, and the kids came ready to speak. By noon, a small crowd had gathered outside the senator's office. Most were quiet onlookers. A few held signs. Journalists hovered with cameras and microphones, sensing something more than a press opportunity. There was tension in the air, but it wasn't hostile. It was full of something deeper. Expectation. Keanu stood to the side, letting the group take the space. He had told them earlier that morning, "This isn't about me. This is your moment. Say what's true." The first to speak was a young woman named Elise. She had been in 18 homes before she turned 18. Her voice trembled as she held the microphone. "I was called difficult because I didn't speak. I was labeled angry because I flinched when adults got too close. When I aged out, no one explained where to go. No one said goodbye, just good luck. I slept in a train station my first week out." She paused. Her hands shook, but she didn't stop. "Senator Clark says the system isn't broken, but if it wasn't broken, I wouldn't still be waking up every night from dreams where I'm back in one of those homes." The crowd was still. One cameraman wiped his eyes. Next was Malik's contact, a young man named Terrence. He was 24 now, built like a linebacker, but his voice cracked as he spoke. "I got out at 17. They told me I'd be fine. But I didn't even have a birth certificate. You try getting a job when you can't prove you exist." He rolled up his sleeve to show a scar. "I didn't get this in a gang. I got it from the guy in my third foster home. The one who said boys like me needed to be toughened up." He looked straight at the cameras. "I reported it. Nothing happened. File closed." One by one they stood. Each one told the truth. Raw, unscripted, unpolished. One girl sobbed. Another stood in silence before whispering, "I just wanted to be loved." By the end, even the reporters had stopped checking their notes. They were just listening. Behind them, inside the glass walls of the senator's office, aides watched but didn't come out. Keanu stepped forward at the end. He didn't speak long. "I didn't bring these voices here to argue," he said. "I brought them to be heard." A volunteer standing near the press line turned and whispered, almost to herself, "This might be history." After the last youth finished speaking, no one moved. The silence wasn't awkward. It was sacred. A camera woman lowered her lens, tears running down her cheeks. One of the staffers from inside the building stepped out briefly, then quickly retreated. No one from Senator Clark's team addressed the group. No statement, no confrontation, just quiet retreat. But the damage to silence had already been done. That afternoon, the video hit social media within minutes. A local station live-streamed the event, and the view count doubled by the hour. What gripped people wasn't outrage. It was the raw, undeniable truth of it all, the kind of truth that didn't need editing or a headline. It was in the eyes of a 20-year-old who said he'd never celebrated a birthday, in the scar on Terrence's arm, in Elisa's trembling voice, in Keanu's stillness as he stood behind them. The clip of him saying, "I didn't bring these voices here to argue, I brought them to be heard," was replayed across every major news outlet by evening. That night, Senator Clark's office released a brief statement acknowledging the moving stories shared by the youth outside his district office, and stating that the senator remains committed to improving outcomes for children in care. But it was too late. The country had seen something it couldn't unsee. Inside Keanu's office, the team watched the moment replay online. Sophia sat with her laptop open, tracking shares and reactions. Malik monitored submissions to the foster files, which doubled again overnight. One user posted, "I aged out at 16. That could have been me standing there. Thank you to whoever filmed it." Another wrote, "This isn't about one senator. It's about all of them, all of us." And under a photo someone posted of the entire group standing in front of the senator's office, shoulder to shoulder, arms crossed or heads bowed, a single caption read, "This is what truth looks like when it's tired of being ignored." Keanu didn't celebrate. He didn't respond. He just printed that photo and pinned it to the corkboard beside Danica's name. Another reminder. Another reason. Another crack in the wall. Because now the system wasn't just strained or denied. It was being witnessed. And that changed everything. The letter arrived folded in thirds, handwritten on lined paper with slightly smudged ink. It came tucked inside a plain white envelope addressed simply to Keanu Reeves, C/O, the Foster Files Project. It didn't arrive with a PR kit or an email alert. Sophia found it in the stack of Daily Mail, sitting between a stack of printed testimonials and a utility bill. She opened it carefully, read the first few lines, and then handed it to Keanu without a word. He sat at his desk, unfolded it slowly, and read, "Dear Mr. Reeves, I don't know if this will ever reach you. I'm not very good with computers. My niece helped me find your address. I just wanted to say thank you for remembering us, for remembering people like me. When I was 29, I got sick, really sick. I was a single mom, working 2 jobs and trying to stay ahead of rent. I had no family nearby, no help. When I was hospitalized for 8 weeks, the state took custody of my daughter. I didn't lose her because I was abusive. I lost her because I got sick and couldn't speak up for myself fast enough. When I was discharged, they told me she was already placed. Said the system was moving forward, that it would be confusing to bring her back, like she was a case file, not my child. Keanu stopped reading for a moment. The words blurred on the page. He took a deep breath and continued. I followed the rules. I attended every court hearing. I paid what they said I owed. I wrote letters. I passed every test they gave me. And still, they told me it was too late. My daughter's 21 now. I haven't seen her in 9 years. I don't even know if she knows I tried. But I did. I still am. I watch your videos. I cry every time. Not because they're sad, but because you're the first person I've seen who seems to know we exist. Thank you. That's all I wanted to say. Sincerely, Angela M., Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Keanu read it twice. Then he picked up the phone. He didn't ask his team to track her down. He didn't call a producer or draft a reply with legal approval. He just turned the letter over, found the return address in the corner, and dialed the landline number written in pencil at the bottom of the page. It rang 4 times. Then a quiet voice answered. Hello? Keanu hesitated only a second. Is this Angela? There was a pause. Yes. Who's calling? My name is Keanu Reeves. I read your letter. Silence. Not long, but thick. Oh, she said softly. You actually got it. I did, and I just wanted to say thank you for writing it. Angela didn't speak for several seconds. When she did, her voice broke. I didn't think you would see it. I didn't even think it would get opened. It did, Keanu said, and it meant something. She let out a shaky breath. I'm sorry if it was too long. I tried to make it short. It was perfect, he replied. What followed wasn't an interview. It wasn't an agenda. Just a conversation. Keanu didn't interrupt. He didn't steer the call. He just listened. Angela told him what it was like to lose her child, not to violence or neglect, but to red tape. How she had gone into the hospital with pneumonia and left with her world gone. How she had done everything they asked, followed every court order, and still was told her child had adjusted, had bonded elsewhere. How she stayed in the same apartment, same neighborhood, hoping that one day her daughter might come looking. I still leave the porch light on, she said quietly, even though I know it's silly. It's not silly, Keanu said. It's hope. She told him she watched the foster file stories on her niece's iPad every Sunday, that it helped her cry, helped her grieve something no one around her ever talked about. But they sort of think if you lose a child through the system, you must have done something terrible, she whispered. But sometimes life just happens, and you get caught in it. He let her speak for 27 minutes. At the end, she asked just one thing. If you ever talk about me, don't make it about pain. Just let people know I never stopped loving her. Keanu promised he would. After the call ended, Keanu sat quietly for a long time. He didn't write anything down. He didn't move to his next meeting. He just let the weight of her words settle. Angela hadn't asked for attention. She didn't want a platform. She wanted someone to know she had loved her daughter, that she had tried, that she hadn't simply let go. And for the first time in 9 years, someone had listened. The next morning, Keanu gathered his team. He shared the story piece by piece, not for show, but so they would carry it too. So Angela wouldn't be alone in remembering. Then he walked to the whiteboard that had become their living archive. Under the photos of youth, under the tags of system failures and facility closures, he wrote a single new heading: the parents who were left behind. Because for every child who vanished into the foster system, there was often someone grieving quietly on the other side. A parent who'd fallen through the cracks just as hard. Illness, poverty, wrong place, wrong time, too little support, too late. They didn't fit into clean boxes. They weren't always saints. but they were human, and many, like Angela, had never stopped hoping. Later that week, Keanu recorded a short message. It wasn't promoted, it wasn't polished, it was just him, sitting in a chair, holding Angela's letter. "There are stories we don't tell often enough," he said. "We talk about the kids who get lost in the system, but sometimes we forget the mothers and fathers who are still waiting, who didn't walk away, who had their voices silenced by something louder than truth, by time, by fear, by shame." He looked into the lens. "If that's you, I just want to say, I believe you, and you're not forgotten." That clip went quietly viral, not with fanfare, but with resonance. It reached inboxes, church groups, quiet corners of the internet where forgotten parents sat, holding on to a shred of hope. Angela didn't ask for a response to her letter, but she got one, and this time the world listened with her. Mariah stood outside the community college on the morning the letter arrived. It had been a long semester, longer than most people realized. Balancing night shifts at the diner with classwork, transportation delays, tutoring sessions, and self-doubt wasn't easy. But she had done it. She hadn't missed a single assignment. She was sipping a paper cup of coffee, trying to catch her breath between classes, when she saw her name on the envelope. It was simple. Hand-dressed, no branding, no stamp from a foundation or official department, just a return address and her name. She opened it cautiously. Inside was a letter, informing her that she had been awarded a full scholarship for the next 3 years, covering tuition, books, housing, and a monthly stipend. It was part of a new fund started by the Foster Files Foundation. At the bottom, a handwritten note read, "You believed in yourself before the world caught up. Now, let the world catch up. Keanu." Mariah sat down on the steps. The coffee trembled in her hand. She read the letter again and again. Then she cried. Not the soft kind, but the full kind. The kind that comes after years of holding it together. She didn't call anyone. She didn't post about it. She just folded the letter and carried it in her pocket like armor. In the months that followed, Mariah found a rhythm. She transferred to a 4-year university, moved into campus housing. For the first time in her life, she had a key to a door that didn't feel temporary. Her professors praised her insight. Her classmates gravitated toward her calm. She joined the education department's mentorship program and began tutoring students from local high schools. One afternoon, she was invited to speak to a class of 10th graders about resilience. The teacher had read her story on the Foster Files and asked if she would come in, just for 20 minutes. She almost said no, but something in her shifted. Mariah walked into the classroom wearing a second-hand blazer and shoes she'd bought from a thrift store. She stood in front of 20 teenagers and said, "I didn't think I'd be here either, but someone saw me, and it changed everything." And just like that, her voice became more than a story. It became a mirror. Word of Mariah's talk spread quickly. She was invited to speak at another high school, then a youth conference, then a university panel on trauma-informed education. Each time she took the mic, she didn't tell people what to do. She just told the truth. She talked about the night she slept in the back of the library, about the trash bag that held her entire life, about the homes where she was treated like a chore, and the people who overlooked her for being too quiet, too cautious, too broken. But she also talked about the teacher who once said she had a gift, the librarian who let her stay until closing without asking questions, the hot meal that felt like a miracle, the moment she heard Keanu say, "You're not forgotten," and how that one sentence gave her permission to believe again. By the end of each talk, someone always cried. Sometimes it was a student, sometimes a teacher, sometimes a janitor standing in the hallway pretending not to listen. Mariah didn't want sympathy. She wanted recognition. She wanted the kids sitting in the back row with their arms crossed and their eyes tired to know that surviving wasn't weakness, it was strength. It was intelligence. It was proof they were already more powerful than they realized. She kept the scholarship letter folded in her wallet. Every time she doubted herself, she touched it. By spring, Keanu invited her to co-host a special Foster Files event, one meant to celebrate the growing network of survivor leaders who were shaping policy, mentoring others, and rewriting the narrative. The foundation rented out a small civic center, not for press, but for people. It was an evening of music, spoken word, and stories. Keanu asked Mariah to speak last. She stood at the podium, hands steady, face calm. She wore a yellow dress that one of the shelter volunteers had gifted her the year before. It still fit, and tonight it felt like sunlight. She scanned the crowd, found Keanu in the back, standing beside Malik and Sophia. "I used to think rescue looked like sirens," she said, "like someone pulling you out of the fire." She paused. "But that's not what happened. He didn't save me. He saw me. That's what I needed." There was no applause at first, just silence. And then everyone stood. The standing ovation didn't erupt. It rose slowly, one person at a time, as if each of them had been holding something too heavy for too long. The room filled with quiet reverence before it ever filled with clapping. And when the applause came, it wasn't just loud. It was full. Not just for what Mariah had survived, but for what she had become. Keanu stood in the back, hands in his pockets, eyes soft. He didn't step forward. He didn't wave. He just watched as Mariah bowed her head slightly, then walked off the stage to embrace a line of students who had formed almost without realizing it. A girl with a shaved head said, "You're the first person who ever made me feel like I wasn't broken." A boy whispered, "You said exactly what I've never had words for." Mariah took every hug, every thank you, every tear-gitted smile. Later, when the event ended and the chairs were being folded up, she sat on the edge of the stage and looked out at the empty room. Keanu walked over and joined her without a word. She pulled the folded scholarship letter from her bag, handed it to him. It was creased and faded now, the ink smudged at the edges. "I think it's time someone else gets this," she said. He smiled. "You sure?" She nodded. "I won't forget what it meant. But I don't need to carry it anymore, someone else does." Keanu took the letter gently and tucked it into his coat pocket. A few minutes later, they walked out of the center into the cool night air. No flashbulbs, no headlines. Just a girl who had once been invisible, walking next to the man who had dared to look. That night, Mariah's quote began circling the internet. "Well, he didn't save me. He saw me. That's what I needed." It wasn't just repeated, it was shared like scripture. Printed on posters, written into speeches, echoed in classrooms. And for thousands of youth who had long believed they were invisible, it became something more than a sentence. It became a doorway. It started as a whisper, a social media post from a community organizer in Oakland, a photo of Keanu walking beside a group of shelter youth with the caption, "This is what leadership looks like." Below that, a simple statement, "Run, Keanu." Then another post followed. A teacher in Detroit shared a clip of Mariah's speech and wrote, "If he ran, I'd vote tomorrow." By the end of the week, a former foster youth from Kansas launched a petition online. The headline read, "Run, Keanu, we need you." The description wasn't flashy, just a list of moments. Files uncovered, lives restored, voices lifted. Within 24 hours, the petition had 100,000 signatures. By the end of the week, it hit 500,000. It wasn't just the numbers, it was who was signing. Single mothers who had lost custody and fought to get their children back. Teachers who had watched kids age out of the system. Caseworkers who had burned out but never stopped caring. People from shelters, courtrooms, classrooms, halfway houses, juvenile centers. And thousands of former foster youth, many of whom had never voted before, never trusted a system, never believed in a candidate. They didn't care about political parties. They cared about being seen. Malik printed out the petition and laid it across the conference table in their office. "You need to see this," he said. Keanu glanced at it, then looked away. Sophia studied his face. "You've been doing the work already. This is just a bigger platform. It's politics, Keanu replied softly. And politics is where truth gets lost. But you've already changed the conversation, she said. What if you could change more than that? He didn't respond, not yet. That night, Keanu went for a walk. No cameras, just him. He passed by a mural downtown, one he hadn't noticed before. It showed a group of kids reaching upward, painted over a wall once covered in graffiti. At the bottom, someone had spray painted in small black letters, "The system forgot us. He didn't." He stood there for a long time, hands in his pockets. When he got home, he opened the petition page. It had just crossed 1 million signatures. The number didn't shake him, but the comments did. Keanu scrolled through hundreds of them, all from people who weren't talking about campaigns or rallies. They were talking about dignity, about how they had felt when someone finally stood in front of the world and said, "These lives matter." One comment stopped him cold. It read, "You don't need to be in office to lead, but we need your voice louder." He read it again, then again. That comment didn't ask for power, it asked for presence. It wasn't calling for a politician, it was calling for a truth-teller with steady hands and a listening heart. The next morning, he walked into the office before anyone else and wrote that sentence on the whiteboard. When Sophia arrived, she stopped and read it in silence. Then she turned to him. "So what are you thinking?" Keanu didn't answer right away. "I'm thinking the fight is bigger than the stage we're standing on." Malik arrived next. He saw the board, dropped his bag, and let out a breath like he'd been holding it for days. "People are serious," he said. "They're writing op-eds, organizing town halls. Some are even registering voters for the first time." "I didn't ask for this," Keanu said. "You didn't have to," Malik replied. "They're asking for you." Still, he hesitated. It wasn't about ambition. It was about impact. Could he do more from a podium than he was doing now, walking side by side with the people who carried these stories every day? That night, he got a message from Mariah. It was short. "Don't stop now. We're just getting started." He smiled. 3 days later, Keanu sat down at a round table with 2 former social workers, a constitutional attorney, and an independent policy advisor who had worked on child welfare reform for nearly 2 decades. He didn't talk about platforms. He asked questions. What would it take to build a federal youth housing network? What policy change could protect reunified families like Angela's? How do we fund community-first solutions without cutting red tape that strangles local action? They spoke for 3 hours. At the end of it, Keanu looked around the table. "I'm not here to build a campaign," he said. "I'm here to build something real. If politics becomes the tool, we use it, but we don't become it." No one argued, because everyone in that room already knew it wasn't just about running. It was about rising. In the days that followed the roundtable, Keanu didn't make a formal announcement. He didn't hire a campaign manager or release a flashy video. He went back to work, visiting shelters, answering letters, listening to stories. But something had shifted. The media noticed his meetings. A few headlines speculated. Commentators debated whether he would run as an independent, whether he had the experience, whether the country was ready for someone who didn't speak like a politician. Keanu didn't respond. Instead, he kept reading the messages pouring in. One came from a grandmother in Arizona who had taken in 4 grandkids after her daughter was incarcerated. She wrote, "I don't know anything about politics, but I know when someone's telling the truth. If you run, I'll vote. If you don't, I'll still be watching." Another came from a boy in South Dakota, aged out at 18 and now couch surfing. He said, "You made me believe maybe we aren't broken, just waiting for someone to stop walking past us." The Foster Files homepage added a new section, Policy Dreams. It wasn't filled with legislation, it was filled with wishes. Submissions from people across the country. Make sure every kid has somewhere to go at night. Give social workers fewer cases and better pay. Stop punishing families for being poor. Keanu read every one. And finally, one night after midnight, he posted a single sentence to his website. No fanfare, no press release. Just, I'm listening, I'm learning, I'm not ruling anything out. By morning, it had been shared over 1 million times. Mariah called him later that day and said, "So, I guess we're in the middle of something?" He laughed quietly. "Feels that way. But don't wait too long," she added. "People don't need perfect, they just need real." He didn't answer right away. He was looking at the whiteboard again, at the quote still written in marker. "You don't need to be in office to lead, but we need your voice louder." It echoed in his mind. Not as pressure, as permission. And for the first time, Keanu started to wonder if what came next wasn't a decision. It was a calling. The street was quiet when Keanu turned the corner. It had been months since he'd walked this way. The storefronts had changed. The air carried the faint scent of spring, a mix of concrete and blooming dogwood trees. But the building at the end of the block remained the same. The youth center, once full of voices, laughter, shouts, footsteps, stood silent. Its windows were boarded up. A chain-link fence wrapped around the front steps, faded "No trespassing" signs stapled to the frame. Spray paint marked the bottom panels. The letters were unreadable, but the feeling wasn't. Keanu stopped in front of the locked gate. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a single red rose. He hadn't brought flowers for symbolic reasons. He brought it because it reminded him of what had grown here. Not everything had survived, but something had bloomed. Mariah had. Zeke had. Dozens of others had too. And not because the system made it easy, but because they refused to give up. He reached through the gap in the fence and gently laid the rose on the bottom step. He stood there a while longer, watching the wind tug at the caution tape wrapped around the porch railing. There was no crowd, no cameras, just a man remembering. And then came the quiet voice, not spoken aloud but present in his thoughts, in every story he had carried. When you hear the silence of the forgotten, you have a choice. You can turn away, or you can turn toward them. Keanu turned and walked back down the street, his steps slow, steady. Back at the office, the team was already preparing new files, new cases, new connections, new stories. The Foster Files inbox had received over 30,000 new entries in the last 3 months. They couldn't keep up with it all, but they kept trying. Sophia handed him a printed story from a woman in Nebraska who had just found her brother through a shared photo from 20 years ago. Malik read off updates from 2 new cities launching youth advocacy grants in Mariah's name. And taped to the wall, now framed in black, hung the scholarship letter Mariah had returned. Right beside it, the words, still written in marker, "We need your voice louder." Keanu sat by the window that overlooked the city. It wasn't the skyline that caught his eye. It was the people. A father holding his daughter's hand as they crossed the street. A teenager sitting on a bus stop bench with a backpack twice her size. A woman unlocking a bakery gate, wiping her eyes as the morning light touched her face. He thought of all the names they had spoken aloud this year. The ones in the files, the ones on the signs, the ones whispered in courtroom hallways and shelter kitchens. Danica, Miles, Angela, Mariah. The system hadn't made space for them, but somehow they had found each other. They had made space anyway. Keanu reached for a pen and a pad of paper. No grand speech, no plan, just a few sentences. A start. He paused, then wrote, "Sometimes the loudest voice isn't the one that yells, it's the one that listens and answers." He set the note down and looked out again. There was work to do, but first, there was something to ask. Because this story wasn't just about him. It was about all of us. So now it's your turn. If you've made it this far, you already know this. This story matters. Do you believe one voice can change a broken system? Tell us in the comments. We want to hear from you. What story do you want us to tell next with Keanu Reeves? Drop it below. We're listening. Because what comes next isn't a final chapter. It's a beginning, and the voices are growing louder, from foster youth to caseworkers, from shelter directors to single moms, from neighbors to strangers. They're rising. And maybe, just maybe, Keanu is starting to believe what the country is whispering. It's time to run.